the Amalfi Coast, that beautiful stretch of coastline in southern Italy comprised of picturesque towns and crystal clear waters. A place where you can slow down and bask in the Mediterranean sun while indulging in world-class Italian cuisine. Or you can do what we did and try to run through it all in a day. So this was our first adventurous day in Italy. Prior to this, we had been in Napoli for 4 days, kind of getting settled into what would be our home base for the month of September. You know, doing the boring things like finding a grocery store and gym that we liked and getting household supplies and getting an overall sense of our new neighborhood. And one of the reasons why we decided to live in Napoli for a month was because of its proximity to the Amalfi Coast. So now it was time to get out of the city and explore the sites farther south. For this adventure, we went with one of those tour companies that you find on sites like TripAdvisor. We found one where they would take about a dozen of us in a van to Sorrento, Positano, Amalfi, and Ravello. This seemed to be a decent way to get a general overview of the Amalfi Coast and help us figure out where we'd want to spend more time later in the month. I definitely have thoughts about doing this type of quick whirlwind tour, but I'll save them for the end of this video. For now, let's get into the adventure. As we were being driven from Napoli, the tour guide started talking about where we were going, which was just the best. This has got to be one of my favorite accents ever. I feel like I could spend all day listening to Italians talk about anything, really, but like especially pizza.
The special quality of the pizza. The pizza method. The pizza is long 1 meter, used for a family or big man.
As a foreigner, I feel like there's a certain cheerfulness in this accent that I don't really hear in a lot of other accents. Oh boy, this is gonna be a great month. The drive was absolutely gorgeous right from the start, with lots of green mountains in front of clear blue skies. And in case you forgot where we're going first, I'll let the guide refresh your memory.
Sorrento, 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 Sorrento.
But first, a stop outside the town to take photos of the peninsula. Now, what's funny is that when I was going through this footage a few months later, I thought, that's kind of a mediocre view. Then I had to stop myself and realize that, wait, this is stunning. We just got so spoiled by traveling around Italy for a month to the point where this view seemed like nothing special. And if you subscribe to my channel and watch my upcoming videos about Italy, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So after that quick stop, we got to Sorrento and we immediately started walking down this narrow street that looked interesting. And if I had to sum this street up in one word, there's only one that comes to mind, and that is lemon. There is lemon everything here. Lemon juice, lemon sorbet, lemon spritzes, lemon candies, lemon tablecloths, lemon serving bowls, lemon aprons, lemon ornaments, lemon magnets, lemon shirts, lemon bucket hats, lemon sandals, lemon flip-flops that are way shinier than they have any right to be, lemon tote bags, lemon handbags, even lemon perfume. Okay, this is getting ridiculous, but I feel like I'm missing something. Oh yeah, lemons. Like actual lemons. But not just any lemons. These things are enormous. Compared to lemons I'm used to, these Sorrento lemons are bigger, they're brighter, the skin is thicker and bumpier and way more oily, and the oily skin has this intense flavor that makes the lemons from this region such a good base for limoncello. And that's part of why lemons from Sorrento are so famous. When you take their zest and combine it with alcohol and sugar, you get this incredibly delicious liqueur. And you cannot walk for more than 10 seconds without finding a place that sells limoncello. Some shops have a small limoncello section, while others are entirely devoted to it, including one where you can see the machine making it. These stores are great because you can walk in and get free samples, which we took advantage of at multiple spots. The bottles are also really interesting. Some of them look like normal glass bottles, but I don't know why you would buy one of those when you can get others that look like mainland Italy, or musical instruments, or penises. I don't really know who would buy one of those. So I was in Sorrento the other day and I bought some limoncello in a penis. It's me. Hi. I'm the problem, it's me. Putting the silliness aside, some of the bottles are really beautiful. Many of them are hand painted, so each one looks a little different. And some of them even have spigots built into the bottle, which is kind of neat. Now that I've spent about 2 minutes talking about lemons, let's move on to the rest of this journey. So this street we were on was very visually interesting. Despite being so thin, there's a lot going on everywhere you look. Obviously there's shops everywhere, but when you look up, there's laundry hanging from balconies, signs hanging out from awnings, and a lot of football pride. There's a lot of banners showing the players from Napoli's football club, both individually and as a team, and even more blue and white flags hanging across buildings all over the place. I don't really follow football, but it looks like this team recently had a pretty good season. This was such a fun street to explore, and walking along it with a limoncello spritz in hand made for such a lovely morning. We eventually reached the end of the street where you get a beautiful view of this cliff topped with trees, and then it was time to head back to the town square before the van left. This part of the drive was just as beautiful as the drive to Sorrento, but even more entertaining.
The name of this road is Statale Amalfitana, but many tourists have changed the name. It's Mamma Mia Road, because over there...
Mamma mia!
Yeah, I'm really glad I'm not the one in the driver's seat here. And where exactly were we headed? Well, I feel like I'm not Italian enough to say the name, so
Positano.
There we go. After a bit more driving, we finally saw it. Those iconic pastel-colored houses cascading down the slopes of the rugged cliffs, painting a canvas against the sparkling waters of the Mediterranean Sea. That's right. We have reached the Amalfi Coast. We got off the van in Positano at the edge of town with more fantastic scenery. Just really incredible topography here. We walked around for a bit with a limoncello slushie, and this time we paced ourselves a bit better so we could see more than one street. There were a lot of crowds all over the place, making it really slow to walk anywhere, although I'm sure it's a lot more annoying for anyone trying to drive. And some streets made it totally worth waiting through all these crowds, like this one that has sort of a roof made out of trees. I just love the way nature and buildings kind of blend together in this area. And although this is a less lemon-heavy town than Sorrento, we did see a lemon chandelier for the first time that day. Luckily, it was totally possible to escape the crowds when you go off the main streets. We found an empty staircase leading up to an ivy-covered villa that had the view, the one I was looking for. When I pictured the Amalfi Coast in my mind, knowing very little about it, this view from this vantage point in Positano was the image that formed in my head. And seeing it in person, especially from a point without any people around, it almost didn't even seem real. The only thing that would have made this better would be seeing it from a boat, and I'm clearly not the only one with that idea. This is one of those places where I could have sat and stared for an hour if we weren't so pressed for time. But alas, we were on the tour guide schedule, so we had to get our exploring done quickly. We left Positano around noon, and after a stop along the coastline for some spaghetti and clams and some limoncello, we made it to the town of Amalfi. We quickly stumbled upon a cathedral, which kind of reminded me of Revel Monastery in Bulgaria. I think it's those horizontal stripes on the front that kind of sparked that connection, although the one in Bulgaria is way more magnificent. Like, it's not even close. And as always, this town had even more ways to incorporate lemons. Aside from being able to buy lemon honey, we saw tons of people eating these lemon sorbets out of an actual lemon, which we kind of wanted, but not enough to spend 10 euros on it. It wasn't nearly as expensive to get one in a cup, so Lexi joked that we should have just brought our own hollowed out lemon. I had high hopes for this town, given that it was the namesake of the Amalfi Coast, but I found it kind of disappointing. First of all, it was even more crowded than anywhere we had been that day, both with pedestrians and cars. The views of the cliffs were pretty, but not as stunning as they were in Positano. The hand-painted limoncello bottles had less vibrant colors, although some of them had shapes that were a little more unique. Even the lemons out on display were less yellow and kind of gross looking. And finally, the Americans. I'd swear like a third of the people we walked past in this town sounded like they were American, but like the kind that don't really get outside the US much. When I was waiting outside the bathroom at a cafe, this loud American woman, probably in her 40s, was bitching about how much she had to walk that day. She complained that the single flight of stairs from the cafe to the toilets had, and I quote, 100,000 steps. I swear, this is a real thing somebody said. Altogether, I think Amalfi was just a worse version of the places we had already visited that day. We could have skipped this town entirely, and I wouldn't have felt like I missed out on anything. Really, the best thing that came out of this town was Lexi's lemon fan, which would become a staple for the rest of our adventures in Italy. We had to get back to the van after an hour, and for the first time this day, I really wasn't too upset about it. On our drive to the next town, we had to stop for 9 minutes at what was probably the longest red light I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not complaining. This is a single lane on a side of a cliff, and I genuinely found it interesting how long traffic gets stopped for. Eventually, the light turned green, and we continued on to Ravello. I had pretty low expectations after Amalfi and figured we'd just see another variation of what we had already seen, but I was pleasantly surprised. The views from the edge of town were just as pretty as they were anywhere else, and maybe even a little more unique. And in general, there were fewer buildings around, so there was more natural beauty. Walking into town, you can immediately tell that it's much less crowded and way more open. Even in the central square, there were so few people compared to everywhere else. It was like a breath of fresh air. Same deal with the streets and staircases. They felt lively, but not overwhelming. We spent most of our time walking along this beautiful path on the edge of town, which became the highlight of my day. We walked between stone walls covered in plenty of flowers and so much ivy, passing plenty of lemon trees and villas and incredible views along the way. It really was the perfect way to end our day tour of the Amalfi Coast. And all credit goes to Lexi for finding this path, which I probably would have missed. And with that, we went back to Napoli and ended our day at Cinquantacallo for some pizza, because I was on a mission to eat almost a whole pizza every day we spent in this region. So, 4 towns in one day, with about an hour in each one. Would I recommend doing this kind of tour? Absolutely not. While I liked how much we got to see, I really don't think it's a good way to experience this area. A lot of the southern Italian vibe is to slow down and take your time to enjoy things. But this whirlwind tour was all go, 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 constantly moving on to the next thing. It felt more like completing a checklist than having a real experience. When you just get to spend an hour in each town, each individual experience isn't unique enough to justify all the travel time between them. If I had a friend visiting the Amalfi Coast for the first time and they wanted to spend a weekend there, I would tell them to just pick one town and spend most of their time there, and then do a day trip to another town. If cost isn't an issue, I'd say spend the weekend in Positano and then do a day trip to Ravello. I think soaking in the culture of the town and moving at a leisurely pace would be a much better experience than trying to see as much as possible. Now for us, I think this overview of the Amalfi Coast was totally worth it. Because here's the thing, we have our apartment in Napoli for almost a month, so we can go back to the places we like the most and spend more time there. And I think this tour did a good job teaching us where we want to return to and where we want to avoid, which was the plan all along. So subscribe to the channel if you want to see which places we ended up going back to, and I will see you in the next one.